Very hard time because I couldn't be there for him like a mom should be there.
That a mother, as one of the legal team described it, dancing on the grave.
Puts the knife back in and then picks up another knife out of her kitchen and commits these horrible crimes.
And I recall how shocked I was at the sight of that. And I wasn't the only one who was shocked.
Housewife has been found guilty of murdering her 5-year-old son, Damon, and could now get the death penalty.
On June 6, 1996, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Rowlett, Texas, was shattered by a horrifying tragic incident that would come to be known as the Darlie Routier case. In the early hours of that fateful morning, Darlie Routier, a 26-year-old mother of 3, made a frantic 911 call that would set in motion a chain of events that continues to captivate and divide public opinion to this day. The Routier residence, located at 5801 Eagle Drive, was the scene of this harrowing crime. Darlie's husband, Darren, was away at the time, leaving her home with their 3 children. 2 of them, Damon and Devin, aged 5 and 6, would tragically lose their lives that night. The third, 7-month-old Drake, was unharmed and asleep upstairs with his father. At 2:31 a.m., the 911 dispatcher received a call from Darlie Routier. Her voice filled with panic and desperation. She urgently reported a break-in and a knifing in her own home. The urgency in her voice was palpable as she described a horrifying scene that unfolded in their family residence. Police responded promptly, arriving at the Routier home with just 3 minutes of receiving the distressing 911 call. What they encountered was a gruesome and chaotic scene. The window screen in the garage had been cut, suggesting a possible point of entry for the intruder, lending credence to Darlie's claims. Upon entering the house, the officers discovered a horrifying tableau. The 2 young boys, Damon and Devin, had been viciously attacked and lay seriously injured. Tragically, Devin was already deceased when the officers arrived, while Damon's life hung in the balance. Paramedics were quickly summoned to provide urgent medical attention, but Damon would later succumb to his injuries during the ambulance ride to the hospital. In the midst of this gruesome scene, Darlie Routier herself had not escaped harm. She sustained significant injuries, including bruises and deep cuts to her throat and right arm. Her wounds were described as severe, with a cut to her throat coming perilously close to her carotid artery.
Darlie was viewed by those who knew her as a very doting mother, always maintained that there was a man in the house that night.
Darlie says that strange man
tell me that Devin is hurt. Devin. I mean, she just, the look on her face is just, we're getting close to catching who did this.
At approximately 10:20 p.m. this evening, investigators from the Rowlett
Vicious was a very odd comment that Darlie made on the 911 tape regarding fingerprints.
She's got 2 children dying in front of her. Boy, that thing that comes to her mind is fingerprints.
Common sense.
It clicked in my head, you know. Oh my gosh, I've just touched.
but the prosecution and defense see them very differently.
The tragic events of that night had shaken the Routier family to its core. In the days following the slayings, the family held a poignant memorial service for Devin and Damon, marked by heart-wrenching grief and sorrow. Yet, it was a seemingly contradictory event that would soon cast a shadow of suspicion over Darlie Routier and become one of the most debated aspects of the case. Just 8 days after the slayings, news cameras captured a different scene at the boys' gravesite. Darlie Routier and other family members were seen in a video celebrating what would have been Devin's 7th birthday. They laughed, sprayed silly strings on the graves, and sang happy birthday in a manner that seemed at odds with the gravity of the recent loss. This video would become a focal point of controversy during the trial, with the prosecution arguing that it demonstrated Darlie's lack of genuine grief and emotional detachment from the tragedy. In contrast, the defense contended that the video was taken out of context and did not reflect the family's true feelings of mourning. The tragic incident of June 6, 1996 marked the beginning of a complex and divisive legal saga that would continue to captivate the public imagination for years to come. It raised disturbing questions about the events of that night the credibility of eyewitness testimony, and the role of forensic evidence in determining the truth. The Darlie Routier case is one of those rare criminal cases that continues to elicit passionate debates, with some firmly convinced of her guilt and others equally convinced of her innocence. Regardless of one's stance on the matter, the heart-wrenching tragedy of that night in Rowlett, Texas, remains a haunting and unresolved chapter in the annals of American criminal justice. Darlie Routier's account. Darlie Routier's account of the horrific events that transpired on the night of June 6, 1996, formed the initial narrative of the crime, one that would later come under intense scrutiny and become a central focus of the ensuing legal proceedings. In her frantic 911 call and subsequent statements to law enforcement, Darlie detailed the chilling tale of an intruder breaking into her home and launching a brutal attack on her and her children, all while she lay sleeping on the living room couch. According to Darlie's harrowing account, she had fallen asleep on the couch while watching television with her two young sons, Damon and Devin. In the early hours of the morning, she was suddenly awakened by a nightmare turned reality. An unknown assailant had invaded their home. This intruder, described as a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, had entered their lives with violence and terror. Darlie claimed that she confronted this intruder. A frenzied struggle ensued. In the midst of this terrifying altercation, the assailant allegedly brandished a knife and launched a savage attack on her children, Damon and Devin.
We're coming up with all these conclusions about what happened inside the house. And then one cop found a...
She had done this crime. Why wouldn't she just throw it in the backyard or at the end of the driveway where it could...
Hours before it was announced that there was a verdict. So everyone came rushing back to the court.
Out now that couldn't be done back then.
A crucial piece of evidence in this case is the bloody...
We should note there's still no execution date set for Routier because of additional court-granted DNA testing.
One of the most perplexing elements of Darlie's account was the timing and sequence of events. The authorities questioned how she could have slept through the initial attack on her children, especially considering the brutality of the attack. Moreover, her decision to chase after the assailant, leaving her wounded and dying children behind, raised troubling questions about her actions and priorities in the midst of such a dire situation. Law enforcement officials also noted inconsistencies at the crime scene that seemed incongruous with Darlie's narrative. The lack of blood drops in the garage, where the intruder was said to have made his escape, and the pristine condition of the garage window screens raised suspicions about the accuracy of her account. In the subsequent trial, the prosecution would seize upon these inconsistencies, arguing that Darlie's version of events did not align with the physical evidence and forensic analysis. Her actions, they contended, were at odds with those of a grieving mother and more in line with someone attempting to stage a crime scene. Ultimately, Darlie Routier's account of the tragic events that unfolded in her home that night would become a central point of contention in a case that continues to divide opinion and raise perplexing questions about the true nature of the crime. Her narrative was seen as a tale of maternal heroism, would come under intense scrutiny and play a pivotal role in the legal proceedings that followed.
Open and honest about everything in their past because they wanted help to find who had killed Devin and Damon.
The mother till 20, 30 minutes in when I told him, I said, something's wrong with this scene.
Loud as any person you've ever heard. I ran down the stairs. And
the yellow tape was going up and there were police officers running in and out of the house.
And makes all these little, we stayed up all night one night before Easter making these little bitty Easter eggs with
him in the kitchen. So you see, now we have a progression to the fact that she woke up and she saw a man walking away from her.
You have an absolute maximum of human devastation and loss of life, these two young children, and you have an
It just repulsed me as a parent, I have to tell you that.
Forensic evidence. The forensic evidence in the Darlie Routier case played a crucial role in shaping the narrative of the crime and the subsequent legal proceedings. It provided a window into the events of that tragic night and became a key focus of both the prosecutions and the defense. The examination of these evidence yielded troubling inconsistencies that further fueled the controversy surrounding the case. The slaying weapon, a knife from Darlie Routier's own kitchen, was a central piece of forensic evidence. Its discovery within the crime scene raised perplexing questions about the nature of the attack. How had the assailant gained access to the kitchen knife within the Routier residence? This fact alone seemed to cast doubt on Darlie's account of an intruder breaking in. Blood spatter analysis, another critical component of the forensic investigation, revealed unsettling disparities. The patterns of blood distribution within the home did not align with Darlie's description of the events. Specifically, the blood spatter pattern suggested that the attack had occurred differently from how she had portrayed it. Instead of a frenzied struggle in the living room, as she had claimed, the patterns indicated that the attack was more contained, possibly within the confines of the kitchen. The most damning forensic evidence, perhaps, was the examination of fingerprints and DNA. The analysis of the blood found at the crime scene did not corroborate Darlie's accounts of an unknown intruder. Instead, it pointed towards a different narrative. DNA tests conducted on the slaying weapon, the kitchen knife, revealed that it bore the genetic material of both Darlie and her sons, Damon and Devin.
Long time.
I'm about as close to it as any other person on earth. And I can tell
when someone that you've become close to actually goes to the death
It's horrible. It's horrible because
what happened at the trial and what errors occurred, if any, at the trial. One of the main problems is someone took a butcher knife and cut their neck with the left hand when you're right-handed and did that to them.
But from what I understand, it seems a knife was taken from the knife block in the house.
Flying in the air. And that if that knife was the one that used it, it would have multiple. They made comments from the beginning of her breast implants and her. To me, it's outrageous. It's the idea you can look at somebody.
This revelation raised serious doubts about the veracity of Darlie's account. How could her DNA be present on the slaying weapon if she had been engaged in a life or demise struggle with an intruder? It seemed to suggest that she had come in contact with the weapon during the course of the attack, rather than a struggle over its possession. Additionally, fingerprint analysis introduced further complexity to the case. A fingerprint found on the windowsill in the garage, the supposed point of entry for the intruder, was determined not to belong to anyone within the Routier family. This discovery initially seemed to support Darlie's claims of an intruder, as it indicated that an unknown person had been at the scene. However, the defense would later raise doubts about the origins of the fingerprint. Fingerprint expert Pat Wertheim testified that he could not definitely rule out Darlie Routier's right ring finger as the source of the point. This testimony added another layer of ambiguity to the forensic evidence and became a point of contention during the trial. In summary, the forensic evidence in the Darlie Routier case presented a complex and contradictory narrative. The slaying weapon, blood spatter patterns, and DNA analysis all raised questions about the accuracy of Darlie's accounts. While some aspects of the evidence seemed to align with her claims, others cast doubt on the presence of an intruder and suggested a different sequence of events. This forensic puzzle would become a central point of contention during the trial, with both the prosecution and the defense presenting their interpretations of the evidence to the court. Ultimately, the forensic evidence added layers of complexity to a case that continues to defy easy resolution and remains the subject of intense debate.
Because when I got involved in this case, the very last thing that I expected was to find a mother.
Yes, I believe so.
Can you describe
my neck
describe the attack?
My neck was cut.
Darren did come back from across the street, and I told him to try to help the other boy.
It was a day like any other day, you know. I had up. Damon followed behind me.
Because TV was on.
The TV was on. We had a big screen TV behind us.
Things her way, who is unhappy with her state of affairs, who's having financial problems, having.
I really wasn't concerned about her boys because she asked me about her jewelry that was sitting on the counter.
He was more quieter, but he loved to play with all the other kids to prove my innocence. It's not going to just prove that I did not.
The trial of Darlie Routier which commenced in January 1997, marked a pivotal moment in the unfolding tragedy that had crippled Rowlett, Texas, and captured the nation's attention. It was a trial that would seek to unravel the mysteries of that fateful night in June 1996 and determine the culpability of a mother accused of the unthinkable. The prosecution's case hinged on a theory that painted Darlie Routier as the perpetrator of a heinous crime, driven by dire financial difficulties. They argued that the family's financial struggles had reached the breaking point, leading Darlie to commit the unthinkable act of slaying her own sons, Damon and Devin, as a desperate and horrifying solution to their problems. In their portrayal of Darlie, the prosecution characterized her as a self-centered and materialistic woman, one who had grown resentful of the burdens her children represented in the face of their financial troubles. They presented her as a woman who was, in their words, cold enough to slay her own 2 children. The crux of the prosecution's argument lay in the notion that Darlie Routier had a motive for the slayings. Both of her sons held life insurance policies, and the prosecution asserted that these policies would provide her with a financial lifeline, albeit a heart-wrenching cost. They contended that the policy payouts, while substantial, would only amount to $10,000, a sum that would not be sufficient to cover the family's mounting debts and funeral expenses. The defense, on the other hand, vigorously contested these allegations, presenting a starkly different narrative to the court. They argued that there was simply no plausible motive for Darlie to have committed such an unspeakable act. They emphasized that the case lacked any confession, a crucial element in establishing guilt, and contended that there were no credible witnesses to the alleged crime.
On death row for how long?
I came here early February 1997.
Crimes. It becomes more fantastic every time that you look at another piece of physical evidence here.
I think that I'm very blessed to have a lot of family.
Some reservation about there were 2 people in that house. So I was concerned about Darren.
She'd rather be dead than to live her life in prison for something she didn't do.
The trial also featured expert witnesses who offered conflicting testimonies on crucial elements of the case. San Antonio Chief Medical Examiner Vincent DeMaio testified that the wound to Darlie's neck was not consistent with self-inflicting injuries, contradicting the earlier assertions of her treating physicians. Another expert witness, Tom Bevel, provided testimony about the cast-off blood found on the back of Darlie's nightshirt. He suggested that the blood patterns indicated she had raised the knife over her head as she withdrew it from each boy to knife again, which seemed to challenge her account of a struggle with an intruder. Ultimately, only February 1st, 1997, the jury delivered its verdict. Darlie Routier was found guilty of the first-degree slaying of her son Damon. Just 3 days later, on February 4th, she was sentenced to capital punishment by lethal injection, a sentence that would place her on Ending Row in the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas. The trial of Darlie Routier remains one of the most closely examined and debated criminal cases in the annals of American legal history. It was a trial marked by starkly contrasting narratives, conflicting expert testimonies, and the intense emotions surrounding the loss of 2 young lives. The verdict and subsequent sentence would be the subject of ongoing scrutiny and appeals, as supporters of Darlie Routier's continue to assert her innocence, while others remain convinced of her guilt.
It is a very, you're isolated from the world, you're cut off from your family, from life.
It was apparent that it was obvious that he was still alive. I'll never forget his face. He was looking up at
This made it a capital murder case because he was under 6.
Right.
He was only 5.
Difficult to see my wife being portrayed as someone she's not. And when the time comes out.
In front of the house, I saw a man running out the front door. I got out of my car.
The way that the trial was played out, even though I was only...
Controversial silly string video. The controversial silly string video became a significant point of contention during Darlie Routier's trial, contributing to the already complex and emotionally charged case. The footage, which showed Darlie and her family celebrating at the gravesite of her sons, Damon and Devin, with silly string, had a profound impact on public perception and played a pivotal role in the prosecution's argument. The video captured a deeply polarizing moment in the aftermath of the tragedy. 8 days after the brutal slayings of her young sons, Darlie Routier and her family gathered at the boys' gravesite to commemorate what would have been Devin's 7th birthday, in a moment that many found deeply disturbing and incongruous with the expectations of grief. Darlie and those present were seen laughing, singing, and playfully spraying silly string over the graves. This footage, when presented during the trial, had a profound impact on the jurors and spectators alike. It was used by the prosecution to build the narrative of Darlie as a mother who displayed a shocking lack of grief over the loss of her children. In their eyes, her actions seemed inconsistent with the anguish and the sorrow one would expect from a mother who had just buried her sons. The celebratory nature of the gathering, marked by laughter and the use of silly string, clashed starkly with the somber and mournful image typically associated with such a heartbreaking occasion. Prosecutor Greg Davis seized upon this video as evidence of Darlie's true character, portraying her as a woman who has callous, self-centered, and detached from the immense grief that her actions had purportedly caused. Her argued that her behavior in the video demonstrated a lack of remorse and an inability to comprehend the gravity of her situation. However, it's important to note that Darlie's family and supporters offered a different perspective on the video. They contended that the footage had been selectively edited and that it did not accurately reflect the entirety of the gathering at the gravesite. According to them, the video failed to show an earlier, more solemn ceremony that had taken place to honor the memory of the two boys. Darlie herself addressed the video, explaining her actions by stating, "He wanted to be 7. I did the only thing I knew to do to honor him and give him all his wishes because he wasn't here anymore. But how do you know what you're going to do when you lose 2 children? How do you know how you're going to act?" Despite this explanation, the impact of the silly string video on public opinion on the perception of Darlie Routier cannot be understated.
But the shooting silly string was all that the jury saw.
They had balloons out and that sort of thing. There was a news crew out there and they filmed the party, which was labeled.
And I recall how shocked I was at the sight of that. And I wasn't the only one who was shocked.
She was chewing gum. She wasn't crying. And she looked like she was enjoying the attention, quite frankly.
I was really taken aback by her demeanor. I tell you, as a parent, I found it disgusting.
Party for Devin at his graveside.
We did have a party for him, which I've been.
They sprayed silly string, which took maybe 20 seconds. They sang happy birthday, and you hear Darlie.
And she didn't have the demeanor of a mother whose children had been brutally murdered a few days before.
It added another layer of complexity to an already emotionally charged trial, further dividing those who believed in her innocence from those who were convinced of her guilt. Ultimately, the video became a symbol of the prosecution's argument that Darlie Routier was not the grieving mother she appeared to be. It reinforced their narrative of a motiveless crime committed by a mother who, they argued, had grown resentful of her own children. However, for Darlie supporters, it served as a reminder of the limitations of perception and the complexities of human grief, leaving the case of Darlie Routier mired in controversy and debate. Post-trial appeals. The post-trial appeals in the Darlie Routier case constitute a significant chapter in the ongoing legal saga surrounding her conviction. Following her conviction and sentencing to capital punishment in 1997, her legal team mounted a series of appeals, alleging trial errors and seeking to introduce new DNA evidence that they believed could potentially exonerate her. These appeals have been a protracted and contentious aspect of the case, with varying outcomes. One of the primary contentions in these post-trial appeals was the assertion of trial errors. Darlie Routier's defense team argued that numerous irregularities had occurred during the trials, including issues related to the official trial transcript and the handling of evidence at the crime scene. These claims were aimed at challenging the fairness of the trial and the reliability of the verdict. While some of these appeals were fled and subsequently denied, others led to significant developments in the case. One of the most notable developments was the request for new DNA testing. DNA testing technology had advanced since the time of her original trial, and her legal team believed that re-examining the evidence using these advanced techniques could yield crucial information. In June 2008, a significant breakthrough occurred when Darlie Routier was granted the right to new DNA tests. This decision represented a significant development in her legal battle, as it offered the possibility of obtaining fresh forensic evidence that could either support her claims of innocence or reinforce the prosecution's case. These DNA tests were seen as a potential turning point in the case, and they raised hopes among her supporters that her conviction could be reconsidered. Furthermore, in January 2014, Chief Judge of the Western District, Fred Beery, granted the request from both the prosecution and the defense for further DNA tests. These tests were deemed vital to the defense and were focused on the key pieces of evidence, including a bloody fingerprint found in the house, a bloody sock, and her nightshirt.
The fingerprint does not match Darlie, Darren's, any of the police.
All of those patterns are consistent again with her using that knife repeatedly to stab the two boys.
From what I understand, that fingerprint was not identifiable.
And they're on the outside of the shirt, again consistent with that knife being repeatedly brought up and bound by the truth first and foremost. I'm also bound by rules of evidence and procedure. The Routier family's not.
Their expert tried to downplay it, because if you follow the chain of custody.
Heard claims about DNA, they don't back those claims up. About every 5 years, there's another new.
Look at her, jurors can look at her and decide, yes, she's a killer.
This ongoing pursuit of DNA testing indicated the continued commitment to uncovering the truth of what transpired on that tragic night in 1996. As of 2022, the results of these DNA tests were still pending. This protracted process reflects the complexity of forensic analysis and the meticulous nature of reviewing evidence in a high-stakes capital slaying case. The post-trial appeals and the pursuit of new DNA evidence underscored the enduring controversy and uncertainty surrounding the case of Darlie Routier. Her supporters contend that the introduction of advanced DNA testing could provide the evidence needed to exonerate her, while those who believe in her guilt remain skeptical of the potential outcomes. This case continues to be a source of intense debate and scrutiny, with the pending DNA results holding the potential to reshape its trajectory once more. Divorce and family impact. In 2011, the already tumultuous life of the Routier family took another significant turn when Darren Routier, Darlie's husband, filed for divorce. This decision came after years of enduring the emotional and legal challenges associated with Darlie's conviction and imprisonment. Despite the strain on their marriage, Darren continued to believe in his wife's innocence and maintained his unwavering support for her. The divorce was described as mutual and very difficult by Darren, highlighting the toll on Darlie's legal battle had taken on their relationship. The decision to divorce was, in part, an attempt to bring an end to the limbo they had been living in since her arrest and subsequent conviction. The family had been grappling with the weight of her incarceration, legal appeals, and the ongoing public scrutiny of their lives. One of the most heart-wrenching aspects of the divorce was its impact on the couple's youngest son, Drake. Drake Routier, who had miraculously survived the horrifying events of June 6, 1996, when his brothers Damon and Devin were brutally slayed, continued to visit his mother, Darlie, in jail.
Very hard time because I couldn't be there for him like a mom should be there.
Or hug him?
No.
Or hold his hand?
No. I knew early that it was something different. I was feeling things with my heart. They love him, which that also told me a lot because I don't believe that Darren physically did this.
Of the state's witnesses, the defense team tried to win it with oratory, just talk the way out.
That a mother, as one of the legal team described it, dancing on the grave.
Positive with the investigation and testing that's happening right now, that I will.
His unwavering support and love for her were evident in his regular visits, even as he faced his own profound challenges. In a tragic twist of fate, young Drake was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia. This devastating illness further compounded the family's already substantial burdens. Drake's battle with cancer added a layer of pain and hardship to an already fraught situation, testing the strength and resilience of both him and his family. Despite the family's fractures, Drake's visit to his mother in jail served as a poignant reminder of the enduring bonds of love and family ties that persisted even in the face of overwhelming adversity. His faith in his mother's innocence was unwavering, mirroring the convictions of his father, Darren. The Routier family's journey has been marked by profound tragedy, heartache, and an unyielding commitment to challenging Darlie's conviction. It is a story of family torn apart by circumstances beyond their control, yet bound together by love and the enduring belief in Darlie's innocence. In the midst of personal trials, legal battles, and health challenges, their family ties and the quest for justice for Darlie Routier remain central to their lives. Current incarceration. As the most recent information available, Darlie Routier remains incarcerated at the Mountain View Unit Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Her life has been defined by the confines of the prison system as she continues to serve her sentence, which include an ending penalty conviction. Darlie Routier's case has garnered national and international attention due to its controversial nature and ongoing legal battles. Throughout her time in prison, she has consistently maintained her innocence in the slayings of her son, Damon and Devin, a claim that has been central to her legal defense and appeals. Her incarceration in a maximum security prison is a stark reminder of the gravity of her conviction and the legal process that led her to being sentenced to capital punishment by lethal injection. Her case remains the subject of intense debate, with supporters and advocates asserting her innocence and calling for a re-examination of the evidence that led to her conviction. Darlie Routier's continued assertion of her innocence, along with the ongoing pursuit of the new DNA testing and legal appeals, ensures that her case will remain a focal point of public interests and legal scrutiny for the foreseeable future.
Horrific scene.
Horrible. Stabbed me several times. I had bruising up to my armpits. And then had it been another 2 millimeters, that I would have bled to death with.
4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, no, but what? You must be mistaken. This isn't real. It just didn't. A police presence that was constantly there and constantly.
The crime scene, from the point of view as to who might have committed this, the evidence didn't correspond. That those items were placed there after she had walked around the kitchen. They had been deposited there by cast-off from a knife.
Sources close to the investigation say that the cut across
to the nurses, to her friends, they conflicted with her stories at trial. Anytime you can expose a defendant.
I'm crazy and then snap back and you're normal. That's not even plausible.
The complex and controversial nature of her conviction has made it one of the most discussed and debated cases in the realm of criminal justice in the United States. Public perception and controversy. The Darlie Routier case stands as a stark example of a polarizing nature of high-profile criminal trials and their enduring impact on public perception. Since the tragic events of June 6, 1996 in Rowlett, Texas, the case has captured the imagination of the public and has remained a subject of intense scrutiny and debate. One of the most striking aspects of the case is a stark division of public opinion regarding Darlie Routier's guilt or innocence. The deeply contentious nature of the case has given rise to fervent advocates on both sides, each passionately defending their viewpoint. On one hand, there are those who firmly believe in Darlie Routier's innocence. They point to what they perceive as flaws and inconsistencies in the prosecution's case, as well as the potential mishandling of the evidence. They argue that Darlie's behavior following the slayings, such as her 911 and the silly string video, can be interpreted in ways that support her claims of innocence. These supporters argue that there is reasonable doubt about her guilt and that the case deserves a fresh and impartial review. On the other hand, there are those who are convinced of Darlie Routier's guilt.
You walk out of this here, what will you do first?
Well, I always had this pick, but I just, yes, I have not got to hold my son in 16 years through this. And just being able to grieve, to have, because I've had to put that somewhere else so I can be strong to fight and do what I need to.
They argued that the evidence presented during the trial, including forensic analysis and the alleged staging of the crime scene, strongly supports the prosecution's case. They believe that Darlie's motive, financial difficulties, and the presence of life insurance policies of her sons provide a compelling rationale for her alleged actions. For these individuals, the verdict and subsequent appeals have validated their belief in her culpability. The case's notoriety has extended beyond courtroom proceedings and legal arguments. It has been a subject of numerous books, documentaries, and television programs, further fueling public interests and discussion. These media portrayals have provided different perspectives on the case, shaping the perceptions of those who follow it closely. In this environment of conflicting narratives and impassioned arguments, the Darlie Routier case remains a vivid illustration of the complexities and ambiguities that can rise in criminal investigations and trials. It serves as a reminder that the pursuit of justice is multifaceted, with divergent opinions and interpretations shaping the course of legal proceedings and public perception. As the case continues to be discussed and debated, it underscores the enduring importance of thorough and unbiased examinations of evidence, the role of forensic science, and the need for a fair and just legal system. Whether one believes in Darlie Routier's guilt or innocence, the case serves as a potent reminder of the challenges and responsibilities that come with making determinations of guilt in cases of such profound tragedy and consequence.
Intruder in the house up until we actually searched the house and didn't find one. I thought he
gone to sleep. The boys were sleeping downstairs with me. And in the arm, I was stabbed.
Do we still see a scar?
Yeah.
Can you lift it higher?
Yeah.
What we found when we looked at the records was that these people were in such financial style that if you and I had looked from the outside, we said these people are doing great. But on the inside, they...
Anything?
I would not watch her execution. I would not watch them murder.
Puts the knife back in and then picks up another knife out of her kitchen and commits these horrible crimes.
Unresolved questions. The Darlie Routier case is riddled with unresolved questions and lingering doubts that have fueled ongoing discussions and legal challenges. Among the many unanswered questions are two key issues that have cast a shadow of uncertainty over the case. The bloody sock. One of the most perplexing aspects of the case is the origin of the bloody sock found outside the Routier home. The discovery of a bloody sock, presumably belonging to the supposed intruder, raised significant questions about the timeline and sequence of events on the night of the slayings. How did the sock end up in the alleyway behind the house? And what is the significance of the blood found on it? The presence of the sock has been cited by Darlie supporters as evidence that challenges the prosecution's narrative of the crime and suggests the possible involvement of an unidentified intruder. However, skeptics argue that the sock's presence may be explained by alternative theories.
There's one strange, mysterious item, a sock, bloody, found about that.
Well, we know that the sock contained the blood of the two boys. We know that from analysis. To a storm drain, and it was laying out exposed as though whoever left it there.
Under the scene, they were then investigating evidence, quote, evidence to prove that she was guilty.
Validity of forensic evidence. Another major point of contention in the case revolves around the validity of the forensic evidence presented during the trial. This includes blood spatter analysis, the nature of the wounds, and the analysis of the slaying weapon, a knife from the Routier kitchen. Critics have raised questions about the methods and interpretations of forensic evidence, suggested that it may have been misinterpreted or mishandled. Additionally, advances in forensic science and DNA testing since the time of the trial have prompted calls for a re-evaluation of the evidence using more modern techniques. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.